Well, hello, if you're listening in. Thank you so much for joining us back on the Exodus Entrepreneurs podcast. If you're new here, I'm Esther. I'm a 16-year-old Christian author, writer, entrepreneur, and a lot of other things. And today we have a very exciting episode coming today because we're welcoming Hannah Grace, the founder and editor-in-chief at Flame of Faith Publishing. So thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah. Would you be up for telling us a little bit about yourself and what Flame of Faith Publishing do?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Esther. It's great to be on. So I'm a young writer, and I have been writing regularly since I was about 9 years old. So quite a while now, actually. And started out writing nonfiction and really haven't stopped with that since then. I have written some fiction here and there, but mainly nonfiction's always been like my honing beacon, you could say. And besides writing, I also enjoy editing and helping other people with their work and encouraging them in their journeys, which leads into my mission with Flame of Faith Publishing, to provide a platform for other young writers to share their work and the message that God has put in their hearts. And so, yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and what we're doing at Flame of Faith Publishing.
Wow,
still very new, so still kind of figuring things out.
Yeah, aren't we all? So Hannah Grace reached out to me back in, was it May? I think end of May. You reached out to me, and it's so awesome. So she reached out to me specifically to collaborate, and yeah, I did a little guest interview on the Flame of Faith Substack. I think that was last week. Did it go live a couple of days ago? I don't remember when it went live.
Yeah,
so much.
It was just Wednesday.
It was literally just Wednesday, so just 2 days ago. It'll be quite a while probably if you're a couple of weeks back if you're listening to this now. But basically, we have very similar visions, as it turns out. I think we both have quite a few overlaps.
We do.
Stuff on our heart. So Hannah Grace reached out to me, and it was just a real. I felt like it was a really good, incredible connect from God. And such an encouragement to me to meet someone else who I was like, oh, I'm not the only person doing this. So if you don't know, for those listening, if you don't know, I run a publishing company called Northbound Books, where we specialize in publishing books written by under 25s. And what was really interesting is that we both have quite similar, I think, foundation scriptures. I think at some point, both of us quite have a resonate with 1 Timothy 4:12, which is obviously that verse about not to be despised because of your youth, but to set an example. So it was just amazing when Hannah Grace reached out. And yeah, it was such an encouragement. But we've got a couple interview questions, and then we're going to move on to a couple of discussion points. So yeah, let's get straight into it. I think you kind of touched already a little bit on what Flame of Faith Publishing is. I would guess some of the vision for it. But yeah, like, what is Flame of Faith Publishing? For those who haven't come across it before, what is it you guys do? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, so we are a publishing company, obviously, from the name. But we started in last year, September, October-ish of last year. I would say fall of 2025, I guess, for context, since this will not always be. This will be recorded and will not always be live. So yes, and we currently are working on our first anthology, and I don't have a lot of specific plans just yet for what we will continue to do, but hopefully continue to publish books, and I would say that is our main focus, but also to have an online platform for young writers to, use their talents and to hopefully connect with others as well. That's something we're passionate about also.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the background of Flame of Faith, if that's all right. Like, how did you get going with it? What gave you the inspiration to do it? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I've had this idea for a publishing company for some time, except actually I didn't start out with the idea for a publishing company. I started out with the idea for a literary journal, which might sound a little interesting considering where we are today, but I didn't really know what a literary journal was until I was in one, and then I thought, oh, this is like a great idea. I would like to do this sometime myself, and that was several years ago. I forget exactly how long, but several years. And I would say that I would start out thinking of myself as a writer before I was thinking of myself as a publisher, but that passion to help others is there. And so I don't want to just be a writer. I want to help other writers too.
Yeah.
And so I thought, it'd be good if I could have a literary journal where people could come together and get published. That would be such fun. And I thought that would be a good idea. And I thought about my original ideas before this really all happened. I had these plans of I would start a website, and then we would start accepting submissions from people on the website, and then we would maybe down the road, several years later, when we were experienced and prepared and ready, we would start making yearly books or something like that. And of course, that is exactly the opposite of how it went, because then I was like, oh, we need to publish a book. And so I got together a group of people to do the book first and then to do the online things later, which is totally not how I was thinking, but God usually works in different ways than we plan. So that's
every
how
time.
that goes.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
I have kind of a very similar thing. I was like, I never thought in a different way, but my first book that I published when I was 15 is a poetry collection, and my most recent book is a non-fiction. And I have always been a fiction writer at heart. I never saw myself writing poetry or non-fiction, and certainly not publishing it before my fiction, but God's really blessed me with the way that he's coordinated all of this, and it's just God's way is always best, isn't it? I think that's what I've learned from
Yes, totally.
Always go his way.
It's funny because I'm the total opposite. I would consider myself, I'm more of a nonfiction writer and just branched into fiction, but for some reason I tend to get more of my fiction published in print collections than nonfiction, so kind of similar, just in opposite
funny,
ways.
The way that God just moves stuff, and we're like, never was expecting that.
Yes, totally.
This is a question I actually asked in the interview that will be going live. I don't know if it'll be going live today. I do have it on my calendar. Let me find out. It will be going live today. So the day that you guys are listening to this, there will also be an interview that Hannah Grace did on the Exodus Entrepreneurs Substack, which is so wonderful. And this is a question that I had in there, but I wanted to ask it in person as well, because I think it's a really interesting question. And it is, if people only take one thing from the inspiration that Faith of Flame Publishing is, what do you hope it will be?
Yes, absolutely. I don't remember what exactly I wrote in the written interview. It's been a grand total of a few days, and I've had a lot of things on my mind since then. But yes, totally for me, the main inspiration with Flame of Faith Publishing is really about young people. It is about young writers in particular, but just young people in general, and my generation, Gen Z, the teenagers, and I guess early 20-somethings of today. I'm not a teenager anymore, so I have to specify it's not just teenagers, but just inspiring young people in their faith and being an example of young believers who are passionate about their faith and who are so passionate about it that they want to write about it and share about it with anyone who will listen. And that is really my main core passion about Flame of Faith Publishing, and even the name, that we drew from 2 Timothy 1:6 about, fanning into flame the gift that God has placed within you. That was originally written to Timothy, who we think was a younger person. we don't know how young, but younger, and just that passion about stirring this flame of faith that is in our hearts, and that I would say that is our main. And I know that's mine, and I think I can speak for my team when I say that is all of our.
Yeah, I love that. I love it so much. I think that was the other scripture that was in there that I was like, oh, I love that. I love that they're both in those two in the books of Timothy, how precious those are. And just the way that they lined up. I have a very similar passion, slightly different, but still very similar with the crossovers. It was just amazing to see. Obviously with my most recent book, as I say, it's a non-fiction, and it's all about helping young people discover the calling that God has for them. And I was actually, as I said, I think I said this in one of my emails, but I literally just got off a Substack Live recording with Livy from Crown of Beauty magazine, and we were just talking about you're involved with the magazine as well, and I was just talking about how I just love the vision for the magazine, and the whole thing about awakening the next generation. I think all three of us have that crossover with that desire to say, okay, everyone, it's time to get up. Like God's put a calling on your lives. Let's go and use it. And I think all of us have probably quite a heart for creating those opportunities, which is kind of why we do what we do in these companies that we've built, to give them those opportunities and to give young people the encouragement and support they need to be able to stand up and work in the calling that God's given them. So it's just been such a blessing for me today to have like a triple portion of all of God's goodness through you guys, which has been so wonderful. So yes, I think 2 more questions. I think we'll pull those to the end though, and just move into some discussion points if that's okay. So I kind of have some questions, I think, because obviously we're both younger writers. I think I'm slightly younger than you, but it doesn't really matter because, you know, we're all children of God.
We're all young.
Yeah, exactly. We all fit under the banner. So I wanted to talk about, like, do you think there's a space? What do you think of, like, the space for teen writers and young writers in the world of publishing at the minute? Like, what are your thoughts on how many opportunities there are for teen writers and young people who want to get published in the world of publishing? Because I think it can be quite a closed door environment personally from my own experiences. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I suppose that would kind of depend on if you were thinking more of traditional publishing or independent publishing. Because I would agree, like traditional publishing, I don't have a lot of experience with that because I've not really tried to get traditionally published. But I would agree in that world that your age or lack thereof probably would have a significant impact on that because, you know, they want you to have a resume, have a huge platform, and you're probably not as likely to have that, you know, if you're 20 or under. But the world of independent publishing, I think, really has opened a great door for teen and young adult writers. So it does depend a lot on like which part of the publishing world you're thinking of.
Yeah, I think I see the same thing here. I'm immersed both in independent and traditional publishing. I have a fiction book deal for through traditional publishing from a Christian company.
Cool, congrats.
So thank you. So I have kind of a little bit of insight into that area, not a lot because I'm only 16, like I've not been doing this for long. But my whole heart with this, I think, with the independent, with Northbound Books, my publishing company, is we try and run a traditional model of publishing where there is absolutely no cost to the author, and you just get the royalties as it is. And that is really our heart because I think some people, I'm very blessed that God has given me giftings that I can use to become an independent author. But he's also given me friends and family who are creative, who've been able to help me with cover design and help me with the process. And I know that not everyone has that. I know I'm very privileged to have been able to do that. And that's why I was able to publish so young through independent publishing. But I know not everyone has that. And so that's kind of my heart with Northbound Books, is to create that place of traditional publishing, but it's an open door. Like right now we're currently running through from the 6th to the 6th of July to the 6th of October. We're running a pitching practice scheme where basically people send in their manuscript, whether it's finished or unfinished. We just want to hear like what people are writing and what they're working on and give them feedback, because I think that, as we say, the traditional world of publishing tends to be pretty closed door. There's not really a whole lot of opportunities. So I really feel called into that area of opening the doors of traditional publishing, as it was, because I think there's a lot of stuff around stigmas and myths around it that can probably be broken, but they're kind of hard to get into. I think it's interesting you said about age as well. Age is such a big factor in traditional publishing for most mainstream traditional publishers anyway. I actually did a little experiment a while ago, and I had a novel that I was querying, and so I sent how many did I send? I think I sent 10 queries to 2 sets of 10 queries to these agents, and 10 of them I specified my age, and 10 of them I didn't say my age at all. And I got a response from the 10. I got many more responses on the 10 that I didn't put my age. The one where I put my age, I had nothing back from any of them. And I think that's actually quite sad, but I do understand where they're coming from with that, because I think obviously it's not quite as proven and stuff, but still I do think that's why the Lord is calling me into a space of opening those doors for young people. But I just thought that was an interesting little snippet that I was going to share.
That is interesting. I agree. I think people are less likely to take you as seriously if you're so young. It's like, oh, they're more likely to think of it as a passing hobby or something, which is funny because, like, if you're into, say, sports as a teenager, people will probably take you seriously if you're like, oh, I want to be a professional athlete. If you say that at 16, oh, well, yeah, go ahead. But if you say, oh, I want to be a writer, and why is it that you haven't signed a book contract yet? And why is it that you're not making a 6-figure salary? And this and that, like, it takes time. It takes a lot of time.
I think that is the thing, is that publishing is a long game. Like, books can take years to be made, and a lot of people don't realize that. They're like, well, I want to see the results now. And you're like, no, we're planting seeds now so we can see the harvest in the future. Yes. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I think that is the thing. Like, it's a completely different mindset. I think most writers are underestimated. As you say, with sports and things, there would be a lot more openness to it. And I think actually that's a big strength, because we're so underestimated with, like, the ability as a young writer to suddenly come out and be like, oh, but look what God's done with my writing and stuff. It actually makes a really big impact. And
it definitely makes a challenge.
It does, doesn't it?
It makes more of a challenge.
It's really good because it requires us to go, Lord, because the doors don't automatically open in publishing in the same way that they might do in sports or such, as you say. I think it requires us to really hold on to the calling that God has given us. And I think it really requires us to go, okay, Lord, if this is something you want me to be doing, I really need to trust you in it, and I really need to have faith that you're going to push the doors open for me. So I think it is actually it's almost a strength for us, even though it is tough on the surface. And it is, I mean, I'm being so blessed just by what God's doing through Northbound Books, and seeing what God's doing through Crown of Beauty magazine, and through you guys as well, reading some of your interviews and stuff has just been such a blessing. So I think God really is moving in the teen writers of today and the young writers of today. So I'm so excited about that. So yeah, what is my next discussion point? Let's have a look. I was thinking, like, should we talk about, like, how can we be praying for teens in publishing, for people listening as well, for, like, young people in publishing? I think there's so many things that we could be praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ who are trying to get published, or who are struggling with their calling of perhaps writing and things. And I'd love to, hear your thoughts on what do you think we can be praying for teen writers of today, and young writers, not just teens. I keep saying teens, but I mean young.
Yes, I know what you mean. Well, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was just wisdom, honestly, because there's so much, the world of publishing, there's so much knowledge that you have to have. And like you mentioned earlier about, the different steps of the publishing process, it can be easy to think, okay, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to, format it and get a cover and publish it, and voila, book published. It is not that simple, of course. There's legal things, and there's copyright things, and formatting is not exactly just typing something and being done with it. There's a lot of margins and things. And, there was a whole book I read about, the whole book was just about formatting and everything to be considered. Anyhow, all that to say, you need a lot of knowledge on things, and that can be intimidating to think, oh wow, especially when you're in independent publishing. It's like, I have to do all of this, or find someone who can do it, and then you have to have money if you're going to have someone else do it, which most of us do not have in abundance. And so there's just the basic knowledge that you need to publish quality material, and then wisdom and decision making. And it's like, should I use a pen name, should I not? If I use a pen name, will that make things more complicated? And there's just a slew of decisions to be made that you need wisdom and discernment on. And I'm thinking more in the independent publishing world, since that's what I'm more familiar with, but certainly in traditional publishing as well. You'd have things, like, what agent should I pick, or, that kind of thing. And so yes, you need wisdom and knowledge. And I know I touched on this in my written interview, but also encouragement, to keep going on, because as you said, it's a long journey, and you don't see results right away. You might get an article published, and then you don't get much else done for months and months, and it can feel like, is anything happening? Is anything being accomplished? Am I ever going to see anything from all of this work I'm putting into it? And so encouragement, having that courage and strength to keep going, and faith also to trust that, God is God is using you, if this is really your calling, you need to keep going. And
Yeah.
so things like that, I would say: wisdom, knowledge, encouragement, faith,
Yeah.
which we all need for
we do,
all of
don't we?
life,
But specifically for this,
not just writers.
Yeah. I think the whole encouragement thing as well is like, until I actually got on Substack, I've kind of felt quite alone in like my writing, because I was like, surely, like, is there anyone else doing this? And what's actually quite funny is I have on Substack all of the people I've met who have done any kind of fiction writing or non-fiction, like any kind of writing at all, and publishing, and who are into it. They're all American. I have found no one from the UK, which maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place. But it's just like, I definitely felt very much alone, and I wasn't on Substack for that reason. I was building my newsletter list on Substack. That's what I was doing. But I was just, over time, I was like praying. I was like, Lord, I really need some encouragement in this season. And then he just suddenly, all of these doors started opening, and I started meeting, as it were, all of these people on Substack, these incredible, inspiring people on Substack, and it was such a blessing. But I think, we can definitely be praying for young Christians who are in publishing, for that encouragement, but also for that drive and that motivation to keep going. I think, as you were saying, in that season when you're planting seeds and you're weeding the garden, as it were, and you're not reaping the harvest yet, it can be so tricky, because that can be months or even years of being in that season of waiting. And it can be so hard when you're like, I can't see the result. And for me, I'm currently in that kind of season at the minute with my writing. I published my last book in April. I'm the kind of person who likes to get stuff done pretty quickly. So it's like, my current work in progress is a fantasy novel that I started drafting in January, and I'm still drafting it, and I'm not even a third of the way through. So I'm definitely feeling very much in that season of waiting and sowing and plowing the ground, and not yet reaping the harvest. But I just know God has his hand all over what I'm doing, even when I can't see the direct fruit of it yet. So encouragement for anyone out there who's also in that season: it will come through. There will be a day when is so much easier, and you'll be able to reap the harvest from what you're sowing into at this season. But it is that season of waiting. I will be praying for anyone in those seasons, for that drive and that motivation and determination to keep going. So yes, I think actually bouncing that topic of bouncing off their topic of encouragement and encouraging each other. I wanted to discuss the importance of heading up quite a variety in your mission and the vision that God has given us. Because we focus, I know we're publishing companies and we focus on the publication of books, but we also focus on other stuff as well. I know, as you said, building a community of young writers with a passion for Jesus. And for me too, I'm obviously building a podcast. I'm trying to get together resources for these young writers, and having a very variety filled well almost that they can reach into and drink from, as it were, is kind of quite important to me. And I would love to know your thoughts on the importance of having that variety, and having not just a publishing company but somewhere where you're going to get filled up and prayed for, and it's going to be an encouragement to you as well.
I think that is very important, because yes, if you just focus on the writing aspect, it can be easy to turn it into just a business, which, I mean, that is part of the goal. Obviously, we writers, we do want to make money, and we do need to make money at some point. But it is not all about that. It is also a ministry, and as I had said in my, written interview, the encouragement is something I'm really, passionate about. And we writers all need that. And not just writers, of course, all people need encouragement, but we're focusing on writers for the moment. But that, and having practical resources also can help give you more confidence and feel like you're not just floundering in the sea of the unknown and have no idea what you're doing. And that can help a lot with confidence and encouragement to some degree. And then just the knowledge that there are other people doing the same thing also can really bolster your confidence.
It can,
And the whole thing of community is another thing. As you had said, I didn't really know young writers until I joined the Young Writers Workshop a couple years ago. And it was just stepping into this whole new world where I went from, I know basically no one who is a young writer, to everyone on here is a young writer, and practically all of us are young Christian writers too.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we don't all write the same genres, but we're all writers and we're all in the same boat. And it's like, wow, I'm not alone. And just that knowledge of that community all around the country and around the world is like so encouraging to know that there are others.
So encouraging. I think that's kind of the whole thing, actually, when you touched on the fact that like it's not just a business, it's a ministry. I think that's something that we can often overlook in the writing world, because so often it does look like business. And I know for me, I've been surrounded, I've grown up with my parents in full-time ministry, with no salary, and they live by faith. We live by faith. And so I've been surrounded by that kind of environment of like, I think for a while, my gaze on what ministry actually was quite like very small and very narrow and very defined, because I was like, well, what I'm doing as a author, that's not a ministry, that's a business, because it doesn't, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing this and I'm not doing this. And then the Lord kind of took me through that and was like, no. It was like, and I was like, oh, this is a ministry, this is all about encouraging. And I think if you're doing what God is asking you to do, and you're encouraging others, and you're bringing joy, and you're just doing what the Lord has put on your heart to do, then it is a ministry. And I think so often we do overlook that. But think of it, it's not.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I love that term. It was a good reminder for me. A couple.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, I think it is easy to adopt a rather narrow perspective of what ministry, and to say your calling. We tend to think of that applying to more spiritual things like being a pastor or something. And of course, I'm not saying of course you would be called to be a pastor, but you can be called to be a writer as well. It's not any less important just because it seems less spiritual. And it's not necessarily less spiritual either, depending on what you're writing,
Yeah. I think that's kind of the whole thing with Exodus Entrepreneurs, and also with the book that I just released, Unafraid, Unashamed, Unstoppable. I touched on that exact thing with the whole thing of just, I think, as you say, we often think of ministry as a pastor or like as a worship leader or whatever it is, when in reality ministry is doing whatever God is asking you to do, isn't it? That's the whole thing with it. And the same thing, as you say, with the callings, like it is, if God has called you to do it, then it is part of your calling. So yeah, I think it's so great to be reminded of that altogether, and to go, oh yes, that is what we need to be doing. Oh, okay.
Yes.
This is my next discussion point, and this is one I'm quite excited for. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. So the question is, what do we think is holding young writers back most at the moment, and how can we be supporting, encouraging, and providing opportunities for them? So obviously this is, take that in as many parts as you need to take it. But yeah, what do you think is holding young writers back the most at the moment? Because I think there's so much, and I'll share my thoughts on this in a moment. But I'd love to get your opinion on that question.
That is a very good question. I have not had anyone ask me that recently, or recently, ever, probably. So yes, not recently. It's funny because when I think of the young writers I know, I really don't actually feel like a lot of them are being held back by like outside factors. I don't see a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to be a writer, but I can't because of something outside them. I would say I think the main things that hold young writers back are in themselves, like your own attitude or perspective. I'm not saying that there aren't young people that aren't held back by outside factors, of course that is, but as far as what I've seen, it's more like if you're dealing with a spirit of discouragement or feeling inferior, or what holds you back from finishing your rough draft or something is usually not some outside factor like my computer has completely failed me and I would love to write, but I just cannot get it to work. It usually is, oh, I want to write, but I'm too tired and I can't muster up the energy and my mind is dead and this and that. And so I think our greatest enemy tends to be ourselves. Like we can tend to blame other things like, I have writer's block, it's like, but really a lot of it is in ourselves, sometimes we can be our greatest enemy when it comes to writing. So a lot of it would come down to just an, perspective change. Perspective is so important in all of life and writing. And, just having the perspective that if God has called you to do this, you may go through seasons where it's like, it's really hard. And maybe some seasons you just can't write for whatever reason. Or it seems like things are not going well. You're not, you're getting piles of rejection emails in your inbox and no one is liking your writing and everyone is like, oh, are you still meant to be a writer? Sometimes you can go through that, and it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. So like if things are going adversely, I wouldn't say, oh, well, clearly that's a sign you're not supposed to be a writer, because if you took that as a sign, you would not do anything. So those are just some kind of scattered thoughts I have on the topic.
Well, I love those. I think that's a really interesting perspective, because personally, I think there is areas online most of the time with people I subscribe to on Substack. I honestly don't see a lot that's holding them back. I think that they're all like operating in the calling that God's given them, which is so encouraging and inspiring to see. I love to see that. But the reason why I asked the question was actually because quite often I end up coming across young writers who are actually not just young writers, but all sorts of writers. And this is something that everyone struggles with. I struggle with it. I think we all struggle with it. And I think the biggest issue is imposter syndrome. And I think you talked about that a moment ago. And it's the whole thing of being like, oh, there's rejection in emails in my inbox. Again, like no one likes what I'm writing. And I think I've been in seasons of that when I'm like, oh, this is awful. It's just like, I can't do this anymore. And the only thing that's kept me going through that is reminding myself that I'm not doing this for anyone else. I'm not writing for anyone else. I'm not even doing it for myself. I'm only doing it for Jesus. And I think that is the only way that I have been able to get past any of that. And I think the other thing kind of linked into this, and the reason I asked this question in the first place, actually, which I forgot to tell you about a second ago when I said the reason I asked this question in the first place, is I was on a trip a couple months ago. I think it was last year, at some point last year, and I ended up just having this time when I think because I'd just become an author myself, all of a sudden I was hyper aware of anyone else who liked writing or was like wanted to be an author, particularly younger Christians, and I found a lot of them. I think within the space of 2 weeks I met with 7 young girls who wanted to write, or it wasn't necessarily the girl itself, it was often the mother or the parent or something. And I actually wrote an article about this, but most of the girls were like, oh, I would like to do it, but I can't. And I was like, oh, can you please send me, like, do you need encouragement? Email me, send me your manuscript. I'd love to read it. I'd love to encourage you and support you on your journey of becoming an author. And most of the time they said, oh, I can't do that because it's not finished yet and it might not be any good, kind of thing. And sometimes the parents even said, oh, I can't do that because she's not let me read it and it probably won't be any good. And that made me really sad to hear someone saying that. And I think that's the whole thing that we came back to a couple of minutes ago, was the whole thing about young writers tend to be underestimated. And with Exodus Entrepreneurs, kind of our motto is swapping out low expectations for light, truth, and success. That's kind of the thing that God gave us. And it was like, let's leave behind these low expectations, because I think so often the world tries to push us under them. And everyone around us is saying, oh, no, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You can't do that. And the whole thing with Exodus Entrepreneurs, the whole message with it is, whether you're a writer or not, whether you're whatever God's put in your heart to do, let's leave those low expectations that the world keeps putting on people, and let's go and fight for light, truth, and success, because truth sets you free.
Hard things.
The whole thing. So that was kind of like my back off the question. I think that's kind of the whole thing for whether you're a young writer or not. It's like, leave those low expectations behind. And I would also say, find a scripture that God has given you to stand on, because when you have a scripture or something to hold on to, and you're like, Lord, you promised me this, you can hold on to it, and you can be like, Lord, I trust you for this scripture, I stand in faith for this scripture, and that makes a massive difference. So that's kind of my thoughts on that subject. I loved hearing yours as well. That whole thing about like the encouragement, and just I really enjoyed hearing that. I have a couple more questions, I think, off the back of that, and then I think we'll start calling it to a close. I think there can be, okay, this is one of my questions, is I think there can be a lot of overwhelm, just like a sheer amount of confusion and overwhelm around publishing, because it can seem like quite I think we said about this earlier, quite like a...
And I am interrupting this podcast episode for just a moment, as we had some technical difficulties due to some stormy weather. So that is why there has been a quick break, but we're going to get right back to it, and hopefully it still makes plenty of sense for you guys.
So yeah, I think it can be easy to get overwhelmed by everything in the publishing industry, and I don't know whether you had any thoughts you wanted to share on that kind of topic.
Yes, I totally agree. It is easy to feel like there is so much you need to learn. I know one thing that can be intimidating for writers particularly is marketing, because most of us are very introverted, and and especially self-promotion is like not our thing. Like, I can promote other people's work all day long, but ask me to promote mine and I'm like, yeah, maybe another day. And so, yes, I agree. There is a lot of overwhelm, and honestly, I can feel that too. So I don't exactly have a heap of like helpful, wise advice. Like, this is what you do to deal with overwhelm, because like I still sometimes deal with that myself.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I think I deal with it too. I think it's something that you can't almost counteract in some ways, because stuff feels overwhelming, but it's got to the point where I've been in situations like that with the publishing industry, and there's always something new, right? There's always, like, first of all, you've got to work out how to write your book, and then you've got to work out how to publish it, and you're like, do I do traditional, do I do self-publishing, what's querying, like, how do I get it into the hands of publishers? And then you have to, and then if you go self-publishing, you're like, well, who do I publish with, and do I pay someone to do it, or do I do it myself? I think there's so much overwhelm, because you're like, oh my goodness, what if I get it wrong? I think we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it right, and I think sometimes you just have to release the pressure of that. That's what I found worked for myself anyway. I was like, okay, at the end of the day, we're only doing it for the Lord anyways, and He just wants you to do your best. So I was like, I do myself a pep talk. I was like, Esther, come on, let's get through this. And I was like,
it doesn't have to be perfect.
Exactly, it doesn't have to be perfect, as hard as that can be for some people to grasp onto. And I get that, like, you want it to be the best representation of you as a writer as possible, but sometimes you do have to let go of that perfectionism, and you have to just go, okay, Lord, I need your help to show me. I think we were saying this with wisdom earlier, and discernment, like, where do I need to like learn, how do I need to learn, because there's so many people offering courses and different things, and I'm kind of looking into that at the minute, is creating resources, both free and paid resources, for writers, because I mean, as you say, it doesn't stop with publishing, because then you've got marketing, and then you're like, what about the next book, and building an audience and actually making money? So there is so much, I think, that goes around it. But I've just had to learn to have fun with it and be like, well, this is an opportunity for me to learn something else, and it has taught me so much. I've still got so much to learn, so much I don't understand.
I do agree. The having fun aspect, and one thing also is the technological aspect. Like, you have to build a website, and then you do interviews, and interviews get interrupted. You have to just learn to kind of be flexible. You're like, the world is not going to end if everything does not go according to our plan.
Yeah. This is a good learning experience.
Yes. So definitely the attitude of just kind of showing up and seeing what happens. Totally.
Definitely. I think sometimes you just have to go for it. Okay, let's do one more question and then we'll start wrapping it up. I think, well, actually, it's kind of a long question, so we might split it up. But basically, my question is, let's just discuss like what to do, about comparing each other. I think it is very easy for, as young writers especially, to compare ourselves to New York Times bestselling authors with many book deals and millions of pounds, and we're like, well, why aren't I there yet? And I think we talked about this earlier with the whole expectations thing. Sometimes we can find ourselves putting those expectations on ourselves, even though we know that they're not healthy and they're not what we need to be working under. We still put those on ourselves. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that, is that I think quite often we do end up comparing ourselves to others and we almost put ceilings on our ability because of our expectations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. It is easy to to compare yourself to other ones, and put in that case, it's almost like putting too high expectations on yourself. I know earlier we were talking about putting too low, but then there is also the thing of putting too high expectations, and it might not be as dramatic as comparing yourself to New York Times bestselling authors. It might just be comparing yourself to other younger writers that are like, oh, she's got 300 people on her email list, and I only have 50 or something, for example, and it might seem more attainable, but it still is a deadly thing if you get trapped in comparing yourself to others and like, oh. I know for me, it sounds funny because I'm not that old, but I kind of feel like an older writer in my general community, because it's like, I'm 20 and I haven't published a book yet, and it's like, I mean, as far as I haven't published a solo author project that I wrote, and it's like, I know people that are 4 years younger than me and they've already published books and they're working on multiple ones. I'm like, I could think, well, I haven't finished a book yet, but it's, each person's journey is different, when we hear that, but we tend to forget that. And if I compare to myself, 10 years ago, even to think, okay, 10-year-old me would be totally shocked and surprised.
I know.
If she was to meet today me, she would be like, what? She would think I was this totally different person than I am. So, the whole thing of looking on what you have done, that, because if you just compare to others, that's a downward spiral that's going nowhere. But I agree.
I think I totally, I get that completely. I think it can be so easy to do that as well, to compare yourself to someone else. It's something you have to train yourself not to do, if that makes sense. And I actually did an episode on this podcast about that a couple months ago, and I was just talking about how we actually define success, because I think so often we end up measuring ourselves up and we're like, well, are we successful? And I was actually thinking about this, and I was like, well, actually, even if my business was broke and not doing well, and I mean, it's doing pretty well for a business, and I was like, even if it wasn't doing it well, I would still call it successful, because I believe I'm operating in the area that God has called me to do, if that makes sense. Oh dear. Let's see if we can get you back. Hooray! You're back. I think Substack keeps you on that time.
I thought I got rid of you because you were there and then you weren't anymore.
Oh no, I'm still here.
I wasn't going anymore.
I was just saying, I think
success,
with my business, even if it was going really far downhill and nothing was selling and it was all going badly, I would still define it as a success. And I talked a bit about this on this episode I recorded, and I was like, because I no longer measure my business. I try not to. I do sometimes. I try really hard to measure my business and what I do by God's standards, and I try and measure it and go, okay, are we doing what God's called us to do? Because that's the only true measure of success, isn't it? And I think that's kind of the mindset that I've had to take on and be like, okay, well, I'm doing what God's called me to do, so I'm successful, whether I make £10 or £100 that week, if that makes sense. That's kind of my thoughts on that. So yes.
Yeah. Success is not in numbers.
100%. I think it can be very easy to look at it like that, but it's definitely not. Okay, I think we will wrap it up there, because I think we're already heading up to 40 minutes, which is wonderful. I've had such a great time chatting with you. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so wonderful. I really hope whoever's listening, I really hope you have had a encouraging and exciting time. Exciting? Well, it was kind of exciting. There was lots of off and ons. So hopefully that was entertaining. It was unpredictable, that was for sure. It was a good training. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you go and check out the Faith of Flame Publishing on Substack, because they have some incredible articles up there, and I will link their newsletter below so you can go and sign up to it. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Well,